So the movie came out in January of 2019, shockingly evil, vile, and whatever, Joel Burlington. So I sat there and said, well, you know what? He was here in Jacksonville in 1967. I'm going to prove it to you. So I went up to Jeb Stewart, and I parked my CHR, my Toyota CHR there, and I said, okay, I didn't realize it was one way in and one way out. For some reason, there was a power dynamic between me, Debbie, Diane Hogue. Her sister was Jean. Her mother was Jean Marie, Vicky, which is odd because Diane Edwards is something like Diane Jean Edwards or something anyway, which I don't know how that would play on somebody who was already mentally ill, and he was mentally ill. For some reason, Debbie and I had decided to take summer band in that year of 1967. And my mother had gotten a Bundy clarinet, I guess at a pawn shop, because she didn't buy it because, one, we were going to go on vacation shortly thereafter. So she bought it from a pawn shop where it could be taken back after a few weeks, okay? I had not even opened that case. So we went up there, and I had to research this to hell. May 31st, of course, would have been Labor Day, right? Or Memorial Day, I guess. And then I think school was out and that Friday, and then Monday would have been June 5th. And I'm assuming, I thought at first maybe the class was 5 days a week, but that wouldn't be the case for summer school. It's probably like 3 days a week. And I think I was a reluctant participant in this because Debbie was always kind of wild. Her mom, who was bipolar, they called it manic depression. And people get upset because I remember this, but my mom and Mrs. Davis said, oh, yes, she had electric shock therapy. Don't say anything. Don't say anything. And Jean, the mom, was like the gay divorcee. She was divorced. Her husband was a commander at NASA. And she always would say, well, my husband's a CO, and you're just an E. You know, Mr. Davis was an E and my dad was an E, Chief Petty Officer, and, I don't know what it meant. So that's one of the reasons I said I was 12 years old, 12 years, 9 months. Debbie was 12 years, 7 months. That's how young we were. And we had gone up there. We had to walk up there. We used to go by the 7-Eleven at Harlow and Blanding. And I knew Debbie from the time I was about 6 years old to 15 or 16, so 10 years. And she lived next door to another good friend, one of my good friends, Kathleen Davis. Mrs. Davis was from Bedford Sturdivant. I don't know where Jean, they came from Corpus Christi, Texas, where they had Navy. Now I have said, well, I can prove this. I'm going to use all my analytical ability. Well, all I found out now in these few years is, one, I'm autistic. I'm 69 years old. I never realized I was autistic, but it makes sense. I've taken 3 or 4 of the tests that says, oh, you're on the spectrum. I never knew I was on the spectrum, but anyway, it does kind of make sense. Anyway, so we go up to band. I remember the beautiful teacher. She was about 24. Her name was something like Joy Russell or something. And I had my clarinet, and she showed me how to put the little bamboo sticks in it, the mouthpiece, the reed, they're called reed, and there was cork, and the pieces would fit together like a pipe. I think there were 3 or 4 major pieces, and it was in that little black case. And Debbie had a black case because she was taking flute. She was going to take the flute, and I know I looked like a Rasputin a little bit at that time because I was super skinny, and sometimes I'd wear my brother's Gant shirt and just some jeans, and the jeans that I had were like polyester, but they were slip-on pedal pushers, and I remember that. And Debbie had frayed her Wranglers, and she was always seemed to be tan, and she was wearing a peasant top, sandals, I think. She had her hair cut in a bob, and her mom had let her dye at sienna. We were not even 13, but anyway. So we got to the bleachers by the baseball grounds, and she started lollygagging. I wanted to go home. What turns out, after much, much, much research, because I never had any children, I had this little red T-shirt. It was like cotton, but it had like a rib, a T-shaped rib, white, and it was called a surfer shirt. That's what they had back then. Well, I didn't get that until we went to Daytona. So what I think happened is after this encounter, I went to Daytona. And since Debbie was acting crazy, I wrote the incidents in my diary. I go down to Kathleen's. I'm saying, this is what happened. We ran into this guy. He displayed a gun and all this. Debbie happened to be there at the fence line, and she's, no, you can't write it in your diary. Your mom will read your diary, and we'll get in big trouble. We'll get in real big trouble. We were hitchhiking, and he displayed a gun. So she said, rip it out. You've got to rip it out. I ripped it out and put it in the fence post. 4110 Aldington. Now, what's really strange is I knew the Parmenters. Not Leslie Parmenter, but I knew Steve Parmenter, I believe he was called, not Dan. And because he went to our church, I think, on Jamie's, and he was in some of my classes. No, he was in my 6th grade class, because I have it in this little remembering book where he wrote a note to me. And so he might have been an even older brother. Now, the odd thing is my brother came back from Vietnam after 69, 70, 72. That's right. Maybe before he even went to Vietnam. No. When he came back from Vietnam, they were building the apartments at Confederate Point. They were still building them. First, they built the subdivision. Then they built various apartments like the Preserve and Confederate Point apartments, and they were building the apartments. And he told me, I know this is all convoluted, but he was working for that construction company that summer too, and because it had rained, OSHA made them stop working, besides which they had put all these bricks on the 2nd floor, and they kept loading bricks up there, and some guy put one more brick on there, and he fell through to his death in the construction site. And that was the apartments, not the subdivision. During the summer of 67, they were building the subdivision, Savannah, Jasmine, whatever southern names you can think of, I don't know, Charleston Street, whatever. They built this little subdivision shaped like a horseshoe over there. Beyond the tree line, there was a construction site, which is one of the Bundy's thing. Why was he at our school? I said, I can prove this. So I wrote to the guy over in the president of Stanford in California, and I got a hold of 2 people, and they don't talk. I said, can't you tell me anything about the scholarship? It was a full scholarship. For 8 weeks, he was going to go to summer school. He was going to go to a summer class in Chinese. So what the hell was he doing in Jacksonville on June 5th? I've written to Mr. Hagmeyer. I've written to Miss McChesney. I'm tired of it. They say, well, she's just trying to get attention. No, it happened the way it happened, but it was over. Debbie was talking to him at the bleachers. First of all, I said, she was lollygagging. I said, I'm going to go over and I'll pretend to hitchhike, because it was a summer of love. I wasn't stupid. We had tween magazines and stuff. I said, I'm going to pretend to hitchhike and get the diva a car, So I was standing there awkwardly with my thumb out, my clarinet in one hand and my thumb in the other. And several cars went by, muscle cars, because that's what the guys drove. They didn't wear shorts. But anyway, all of a sudden, this bright red Volkswagen comes by. And it was the color of the cross on a nurse's uniform. It was crimson. It was bright red Volkswagen. Not that common in 1967 Jacksonville, Florida, where the boys would drive V8s, like Chevy Safari and Plymouth and Ramblers and Old Mercury, whatever. They drove. Looked like it looked like taxi cabs, some of them, they were all, the guys, I think they had a shop back there where they would work on cars, and there were pine trees, and there was one basketball hoop that the guys had put in the parking lot. So when this Volkswagen jumped the curve and Debbie starts talking to him, I walked over. The tag appeared to be black letters, about 6 letters and numbers on white, and it was a bright, sunny day. And if you'll look at, just please go onto Google and Google 1967 Washington State tag. Definitely wasn't Florida. Florida was a trash can colored green with a reflective metallic white. Pennsylvania was something like, orange and brown. And California was also a color. So the tag, if anything, must have come from Washington, because it could have been green, but if you look at the tags, some of them were not printed very well, and they're so dark green that walking from a distance, they appear to be black. I wasn't a stupid child, and if I was getting ready to go on vacations, I noticed tags. Oh, this guy's from out of town. And we're 12 going on 13. Why is Debbie talking to a 20-year-old? He appeared to be between 20 and 22. Okay, he had a mole. He wasn't wearing a shirt, because when he rode by me, I said, "Hey, naked," because he wasn't wearing a shirt. Now, I assumed that he may have been playing some pickup basketball at the hoop. The hoop was on a pine tree. Somewhere near the front of the school was a pine tree with a hoop, basketball hoop. So I figured, okay, so some Navy guys come here. I thought he might be like a Navy officer or something. He was wearing tan shorts. And she talked, and she leaned in that peasant blouse, and she's talking, and I stood to the rear passenger side of the damn vehicle. I think I've moved around some. He had a very neat haircut. Look at his high school picture, and look at Rob Lowe. He looked kind of like that. Look at a young Rob Lowe. That's how he looked. He was slender. His knees were knobbly. I think he may have been wearing loafers. I don't know. I can't remember that. I remember I got in the back. Debbie said, "Get in." And I said, "No." I said, "Debbie, it's just pretend. We're just pretending." And she said, "Get in." And she lowered this thing, and I got in, and there were books in the back, and I'm trying to move. I said, "Well, there's books back here." He said, "Just move the books. Just move the books." And then, the story. We went down to Lamoille. We went around the baseball grounds. We came to Lamoille. He turned left. He drove up near the pasture, which became Kmart a year later, and now is the Amazon's wrapping center. But back then it was a field with cows in it, belonged to a man called Howard Towers Hardware, had a field with cows in it, and there actually were some pecan trees along there. Anyway, so we're facing this field, and all of a sudden there's a silver revolver he pulled from somewhere, and he pointed it to the ceiling. And up to then, as a matter of fact, I had kind of calmed down thinking, well, this is just some nice guy. He's giving us a ride. He's older than most of the guys in the neighborhood. There were like 2 generations of kids. There were kids that were born in the 40s, and they would be like Ingrid Power, Craig Power, Paul Howard, Walter Davis, maybe Stan Parker, but there was like that generation. And then there was us who were born in the 50s. And really, we were just like the pest. They didn't have nothing. There was no sexual attraction to these older guys because they were a little bit too old, They were beyond our age. They weren't like, well, he's 15. These were people that were 18 and 19. That was out of our age. So anyway, he pulled the gun. He's pointing it to the ceiling. There were whiffs of black hair. He had a very slender hand, like a pianist or a surgeon, a very slender hand. You could see his wrist. There were black hairs on his wrist. And I said, "What is your name?" Debbie shut up. She wasn't talking. She was like he'd gone into shock or something. She was not talking. I said, "Oh, hell, what have you gotten us into now?" And so I saw his eyes in the rearview mirror, and it looked like a void. They almost seemed crossed, but it was like they were black. His eyes were black, and he wasn't responding. So I said, "What is your name?" He said, "Theodore." And then I said, "Theodore?" I said, "What's your last name?" And he said, "Bundy." And I said, "Your name is Bundy like my clarinet, and your gun is silver like Debbie's flute. Debbie's father's an admiral at NASA. Now, see, that's Jean. She kept saying, my husband's a CEO, my husband. I said, your husband? I said, Debbie's father's an admiral at NASA. Well, little did I know at 12 years, 9 months that there's only 5 or 6 admirals. They're like the chief of staff or something. I don't know. I just said, Debbie's father's an admiral at NASA. And I said, you ought to meet Vicki and Jeannie. They're so beautiful and they're already on their own. And then I said, if you're looking for girls, you should go up to the high school. And I just started talking. And then Debbie started talking. And she talked and I talked. And the gun kind of disappeared. And it seemed like there were books back there. Oh, and at some point, I had looked in one of the books, a book like a black Bible, or maybe it seemed like a leather Bible. I said, oh, it's a Bible. This is when I first got in. And I opened it. It was like a concordance. And it was like English on one side and what I would call hieroglyphics on the other. So I said, oh, what is this? Put it down. And there was a pale yellow, what I call a golf shirt. My father did not golf. My father used his old Navy gear till it basically shredded on him. So he might have some ribbed T-shirts, but no, my father was not a golfer. He had that old Navy denim jacket that they had and bell-bottom pants. He would wear that stuff around his carport and fixing up stuff. Poor Dad. As a matter of fact, they had Navy sheets. They use those sheets until your toenails rip the sheets, But they were very frugal people. Anyway, they'd both been through the Depression. But no, Mr. and Mrs. Davis were divorced, so I don't even know why I said that. But anyway, through a series of events, I researched and researched and researched. Finally, Debbie saw some of the stuff I'd written, and she had an apoplectic fit, and she said, take it all down, take it down. I don't want to be defamed or something. And I said, it's ridiculous. That's when I got sick. This was April, about 2 years ago. I got sick to my stomach because I said, all I'm doing is reminiscing about the summer of 67. And she wanted it all down. And then it began to realize that apparently she had given her phone number, and then Jeannie got pregnant. And they said the baby was stillborn. And my friend who was a dancer in Tallahassee, she was a senior in Tallahassee, the only other dancer from Jacksonville. And she said, young people that have children don't usually have stillborn children. Because Mrs. Hogue said, Jeannie's baby he was stillborn. And I thought, after all that trouble, I'm thinking, because Jeannie, and I remember Jeannie standing there pregnant, holding the Barbra Streisand Color Me Barbara. And it was a sort of a chartreuse album. And I said, I don't want to hear anything about this. I don't know anything about this. And then at one point, we had to ride her. Debbie came and got me, and we had to ride our bikes all the way to Riviera Apartments. And she had a 3-page typewritten, I believe it was typewritten, and she came to my house and put air in the tires. She picked me, and we had to ride on Blanding, which was very unusual. And the guy there looked like Mike Nesmith of the Monkees. His hair was shoulder length. It seemed like he was wearing corduroy slacks and a white turtleneck. And I went to get water out of the refrigerator because it was a long ride. And he said, don't open the refrigerator. And he gave us tepid water at the sink, in the little sink area. It was like a apartment, Riviera apartment. So it was upstairs, and I started getting nervous because I said, look, you're giving this guy a Dear John letter, and, he might take offense to it. And then there was a bicycle wheel hanging over the island kitchen, and it had like spatulas and ladles and things hanging from this bicycle. I'd never seen that before. Now, I've seen people make a curtain out of gum wrappers. You make a little football thing out of a gun. Everybody was making chains out of gum wrappers. And then sometimes people would have beads as a shower curtain, or beads, they had room beads. And one guy that I knew had a giant American flag as a shower curtain. They were kind of hippies that was later on down the road. Anyway, that T-shirt was from Daytona. So what I think happened was children, I've never had children. So if you're skinny as a rail at 12 years, 9 months. When you're 14, you're blossoming. That shirt wouldn't have fit from year to year. As a matter of fact, I have a picture where I'm 14, 15. I said, that shirt didn't fit. So what I think happened is Debbie acted screwy and said, you can't put it in your diary. And I'm thinking, you can run the show some of the time, but I can do some of my stuff anyway, and she made me rip that page out. I kind of resented that. And I thought, well, I'm going out of town anyway. So I'm not even going to be here for band. And I figured her sister Vicky would drive her. And again, my philosophy was this weirdo, this extreme weirdo, who we didn't tell anybody about at that moment, was from out of town, obviously. He wasn't from around here. Because I said, are you in the Navy? He said, college. I said, are you in the Navy? College. And he was very quiet. Anyway, I wonder, they say he called himself Chris Hagen. Well, that's Conley and Hogue, CH. I hate to say this, but lately I've taken a turn to where thinking that he was going to come back and try to do something to me and Debbie, that maybe that was his very first fantasy or something. I don't know. Anyway, I wrote Mr. Dellenberg, the psychiatrist, the biochemist. I mean, I get nothing. It's like nothing. The only one that responded was Debbie, and she said, I'm going to sue you for defamation. Well, one, you can't defame somebody who's deceased. I wasn't trying to do anything. I'm telling the truth that I remember. Okay, and so I wanted to tell the truth. And when this stuff came out, I thought, this is ridiculous. And I look at it now, autistic or not, young people in their 20s, they could fly across the country. Look at Koberger. It took him how long to get from Washington, Idaho, over to Philadelphia, and went through Colorado. I think it took him like 2 days and a few hours. Damn people didn't even stop. Anyways, that's my story for tonight. Thank you. I thought it was important because the more I think about it, and then that story with his brother, Richard, who was born in 1961, that's the same year that little Ann Burr died. What was his birth month? I tried to find, you can't find nothing. You cannot find even stuff that seems you can't find it, but we know it was 61. And Ann Burr died in August of 61. So, back then, you didn't know the sex of the child. They say the rabbit died, your mother's pregnant, and that people would spend a few days in the hospital. I mean, they literally, when they gave birth, they would spend a day or two in the hospital. They didn't just go right home. Anyway, and then Richard Bundy saying he had gone over to Utah and was going to spend some time with his older brother, and then abruptly his brother took him to the airport or something and looked weird and had to go. That's why I believe he may have flown down to Jacksonville in 74. Then I found out later at Gator Lodge said this at Chamberlain Bookmine. She goes, my mother met, I was checking out with the stranger beside me because I wanted to read the later chapters, the addendum that was in 2009, 2001, and Rule died in 2015. My number was something like 389-4998 or something. And I called her and I spoke to her, but she said, was it 68? He did love Volkswagens. Was it 68? I said, no, ma'am, it was 67. All right. It's just a shame. I told my brother, his eyes got big like saucers. I said, Johnny, there's some weird stuff that goes on in this country, not even Vietnam. I said, it's more slow, but there are problems, because I told him that because he started having issues about Vietnam and drinking and stuff. And I said, I know you saw a lot, but they're dead. I told him because I didn't want him to be in any more trouble. I said, the guys some of them are died, whether they were going to be a kindergarten teacher or a tire changer or a furniture builder, they're gone. I said, these things are happening in Jacksonville right now. It's just spread out. Police kill themselves. Police get shot occasionally. People commit suicide, all kind of stuff out there in the world, And I said, you got to go on. What they would want you to do is go on with your life and live a good life, Anyway, that didn't work very long either, did it? But I did tell him. And then what is so sad is everybody's gone. I'm 69 and everybody's gone. And the few people that know, they ain't talking. Or they go haywire over it. because at the point, I just wanted affirmation that we did get in the car, and then, yes, it was Theodore Bundy. And yes, he called himself Theodore because he was 20 years, 9 months, I believe. No, he was 20 years, 7 months. Debbie was 12 years, 7 months. They both were born in November. All right. His hair was kinky. I just wanted somebody to. The roof of the Volkswagen had little white. It was a white roof, and it had like a little peg holes. There were like little peg holes all in the. Because I looked at the roof. I looked at the windows when I couldn't get out. I couldn't climb over into the lap of the man with a gun. There was no way out. The only way out was to talk to him, and whatever nerves or strangeness that made him react like that we had to get out of that car. We had to get out of that car. When we got to Harlow and Blanding and he pulled into that gas station, and Debbie got out and opened the door, and she's leaning in talking, and she's talking and talking and talking, and gradually, and I kept thinking, please pull that latch down, let me out. Pull the latch down. And when I said, I don't even think I bent down. I think I was small enough that I could just sort of scoot down and get out. People, oh, you're lying. I said, no. I remember thinking when I was on that ground, thank God I want to kiss the ground. And the first thing I thought of is Mr. The man that worked in the 7-Eleven. He used to work he worked till his 80s, and he worked for John Payton at the gate on San Juan. What was his name? Shoot. He said he remembered me. I said, yeah, one time he opened a Fresca, and I didn't want it opened. And I bought a Fresca, and I didn't want, the cap off of it. So I took a different Fresca, and he remembered that. Chris, what was that guy's name? Craig? I don't remember. I think of it, but yeah, it's Carol's Meat Market now. It used to be a 7-Eleven. We used to go in that 7-Eleven. All right, thank you. I used to get weird phone calls sometimes, too. All right, thank you. And thank God, right? You said, well, you have empathy. Yes, I have all kinds. Oh, let me go real quick. One more thing. It was over. Never saw him again that I know of. I didn't equate the man at Riviera as being him. I didn't equate Jeannie's pregnancy has something to do with him. I never saw him. So if there was some kind of tryst going on secretly, I don't know anything about it. I do know Debbie got out of high school early. I do know that she needed to learn to ski because she was going to go to Austria, courtesy of her father, to get some credits. I thought she was like an international baccalaureate or something where she would get out of high school earlier. Anyway, whatever. I don't remember. I can't remember. I know she wanted to learn to ski. And Kathleen talked about skiing. I never skied. I don't want to ski. You mess up your ACL skiing or end up like Sonny Bono or something. Anyway, I wasn't interested. I'm not interested. But what can I say? Shoot, I forget. Oh, I didn't know till 78. I never really thought about it no more. Debbie didn't want to talk about it. Life went on. There were so many things. There were assassinations, Robert Kennedy. There was just all kind of things going on, and we were maturing. It was just some weirdo. I figured he must have been somebody from out of town and came through, and he was just an extreme weirdo. And I did tell people over a period of time. I said, yeah, that was a weirdo. So 78 comes, and they have that thing in the newspaper with the FBI notice and picture after picture. I said, that's the guy. That's the guy we rode with. I never equated Theodore with Ted. Okay, so I had my own issues. I had left JSO. I had a lot of heartache and mental illness. Maybe as a young woman, you go through things. But so before I settled into a normal job and finished my college, I ran down. My car had been in a fender bender. I ran down to Mrs. Davis's, Kathleen's house, and everybody was away at Gainesville going to college and stuff. And I said, that's him. That's the guy. That's the asshole we rode with. I literally ran down to Mrs. Davis, Sue Lias Davis. And she said, oh, you shouldn't have done, whatever. But nobody talked about it. We figured, we did not know that way up in the northwestern part of the United States, this Theodore guy had been killing people. We didn't know it. I mean, I worked shift work. I had worked shift work, even if it was a JS up right up until November. I do remember some policemen saying all they found was her jawbone. I thought they were talking about somebody they found on the beach because, if a body washes out in the ocean, sometimes the sharks and barracudas tear it up. So I didn't even know what that was. So no, I never equated Theodore of the strange car ride 10 years, 8 months before having anything to do with this other guy until I saw it in the newspaper. Thank you very much.